Si vyema kumaliza muda mwingi katika malumbano. Hesabu baraka zako, wathamini rafiki zako na tabasamu ili udumishe amani.
Kupata maisha, bonyeza *811 *816 hash. *811 *816 hash.
It is indeed the 8th day of February 2023. Good morning. This is KBC and this is News Check, which is a program that we ensure that we check on what is happening around you and around the country. My name is Bentroy Njoe. Byron Abuli will be our sign language interpreter for this live program, and of course you can be part of this conversation via all our social media platforms as we are live. Now, a lot has been happening in the last couple of days, and that is mostly what we will be touching on, and I can say comfortably that the education calendar has a little bit diverted us from some politics and current affairs in the country, but hey, it's part of us and we need to do that as well. Well, a lot has dominated the headlines. Beginning, what is currently happening today is that we will be checking on the progress of the funeral arrangements of former Education CS Professor George Magoha, who will be having a presser from his Lavington residence. And I think that is happening today is that the main suspect in the murder of fashion enthusiast Ezra Chiloba will be facing murder charges today at the Eldoret High Court. We have drought, we have Justice Chitembo Tribunal, we have the KBC admission, and we will be also touching on renewable energy, and because a lot is happening in that field as well. Well, to help me drive that, I have two gentlemen who have a strong background in law. Beginning from my immediate left, we have Wamboi Shadrack, who is an advocate of the High Court and also a practicing constitutional lawyer, and also is a governance expert. Wamboi, it's always a pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you, Ben. It's always a pleasure to be here. Good morning to the viewers and listeners at home.
Thank you so much. Just next to him is, yes, he has also a background in law. His name is Honorable Jesse Wanyeki. He has a strong background in public administration and public law, and he has also served as an advisor in the State Department of Blue Economy and the Attorney General's Office. Wanyeki.
Thank you so much,
Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
Maybe you start by telling us what exactly are you doing right now?
Yes. Thank you so much. I want to thank the KBC and especially you and your team for giving us an opportunity to come and discuss a number of things that are affecting our country and that we are also engaging in on a day-to-day livelihood. So I want to thank Channel 1 for taking the lead and leading the pack in touching base with the Mwananchi. So currently, we have been in review on a number of issues. You know, the government has been in transition and a lot of things has been happening. So at the end of the day is to make sure that the government works and everything functions for the service of and betterment of the livelihoods of Kenyans. So everybody is called upon to make sure that we have success and we have a proper and secure livelihoods for every Kenyan. So every person or every government that comes in with the mandate of continuity of livelihood and better situations and better life for Kenyans. So I think there is no change per se. It is a luta continua for Mwananchi at the end of the day. Making sure that they get the best and they are served and they get the best services. If it's value for money, they have it. Thank you so much.
And gentlemen, let's first of all do away with the KBC, because this is something that we will be continuing to watch over. And of course, being a transition, we always have some slight challenges in the country. But something I've seen and I've noticed in all media houses, each and every time you switch on a television or a radio station, or even you go to the social media, you will find a student who has not reported to school just because they do not have fees, and they have scored quite well. they should maybe be benefiting from the bursaries, but we have seen each and every time they are calling upon Kenyans of goodwill. Perhaps there are some places that we are leaving out, or there are some places that we should be keen on, especially so that we may avoid or we do away with cases of students lacking fees, the government saying that education is free.
Well, I think it's a very sad state of affairs when you watch the television, when you hear in the radio that we have a bright but needy student who has, or for one reason or another, and most likely for lack of school fees, lacked the opportunity of joining their national school or their school of choice. So, well, you will first attribute this to poverty. We have very high rates of unemployment, even amongst the parents themselves, so that raising the school fees that is demanded by the schools becomes a task that is insurmountable for some of the parents. Again, you will want to look at the leadership of that area, because after all is said and done, when you have challenges, you want to speak through your leaders. The leaders have been doing a good job, if you ask me, when it comes to the advocating of the CDF funds, so that when we lack these CDF funds, when parents do not have money to take their children to school, then it points to the disconnect in the leadership of that area and the people or the children who are affected. But after all is said and done, I think it is incumbent upon the parents, because you see, if there is a will, there will always be a way. But other than lamenting, being at home and lamenting, I have seen in Maseno school, there was a student, and this is my former national school of choice, when you've been called to that school of choice and you are determined to join that school, then I have seen parents just buying a box or getting a box and proceeding to school. And then you go and plead your case with the principal or the deputy principal of that school. So when some of these things are done, it will help these needy children who is also bright to enjoy or access his right to education. But again, I think this is an opportunity for us as a country to reevaluate. I mean, we have moved past the free primary school education. Is it time that we also make this secondary school education free for all? Is that a conversation that the current regime should be discussing or having? So that, you know, that some of the challenges we've been experiencing is that the current administration has also been speaking about, scrapping or free, making private the public schools, the public universities that we have. In a sense, making or privatizing the public schools, then it is going to be costly for the normal mwananchi to access the university education. So I think it's an opportunity for us to reflect very deeply on how we think we should be dealing with the education system in Kenya.
Yes, and Wanyeki, I would like you to weigh in on that, because being a public administrator and also being a leader, you have seen and people have come to seek for bursaries or even asking for some certain kind of help. The government did roll out a registration exercise from PP1.
Yes.
And I'm quite sure by the time this candidate or pupil gets to where it will need a transition, we have already identified some of these needy cases so that we may be able to help them as soon as they are done with that. Because some of them now have resorted to going back to standard 8 over 400 marks. You can just imagine the feeling of this pupil having the standard 7 who are behind him last year. You're in the same class. You are the best in that class. I'm quite sure it's something that really disturbs our kids.
I'll talk about that sector of education in a very different way, because number one, there are parties and stakeholders who influence the way the education sector behaves. Education sector is a system. It has life. It's like an organism. It is a living thing. That is why you see when kids go for holiday, life goes down. It has life. You can feel it in the street. You can feel it in the shops. You can feel it at home. It has life. And so I would tend to think that what the ministry has done and what the government does, sometimes the decrees that are issued and the policies that are drawn by the Ministry of Education, they are not properly implemented, such that the parent and the child are the losers in between. because we have the schools and the principals on this side, and we have the regulators in the Ministry of Education on this side. But when they issue the decrees and the policies, they don't follow up to see whether the same has been adhered to for the benefit of the mwananchi and the parent and the pupil. And that is why you see, there can be a lot of clamor about free education. There can be a lot of clamor about sponsorship, but the mwananchi, the parent and the student are in between. They don't know who is talking the truth. They don't know who is saying what. At the end of the day, they are under pressure to be admitted. They are under pressure to go to school. But they don't know. When they go to school, they are given a list of things to be paid for or to be charged. They don't know which under this list has the ministry allowed and has not been allowed. And when this is happening, the Ministry of Education is not checking to counter-check and to review and make sure that indeed this is the information that the parent is getting and the pupil is not being duped at the end of the day. I give my own personal example. When I was called to high school, the high school I was called, I could not afford the school fees. It was a provincial school. But I had to go to a day school near home to pursue my education from Form 1. I missed my first term and my second term just because I couldn't I couldn't get fees to go to school. First of all, my understanding was eventually I made it to the university from that very school, being the only student for like a span of five years or so to go to the university. But that does not mean that the school didn't have capacity to perform. So there I will be faulting the parent and the student. Sometimes we have parents who have particular mindset about particular schools. Just like I had with this school before I went to my day school next door at home in the village. I didn't think that I would make it to the university. But then I analyzed the teachers who were already in that school. I realized all these teachers are TSC teachers. They are graduate teachers. These teachers who are in these schools, if you want to go to a particular school in mind, you need to remember that all these teachers were trained in the same university or in the same curriculum of education, just like the ones in Starehe, like the ones in Precious Blood, like the one in Kenya High. They were trained the same, so they have the same kind of training. So the problem will not be the teacher. The problem will be you as a student, and probably you as a parent who is supposed to pay fees for this particular student. So I think there also selection. Sometimes parents mislead their children or giving false expectation, telling them, you know, where summer will do this. At the end of the day, you have a bargain and you've put the bar too high. You're supposed, education sector should be like, there is no special school. Already the TSC has made sure that all schools have teachers. And all these teachers are trained by the same universities. They attend the same curriculum. You are a journalist today. You attended similar colleges with other media houses. So if other media houses will not perform, will they blame the training institution? No. It is the thriftiness of this particular institution. So I would feel that at the end of the day, we are misguiding our students as parents, all by allowing them to select various schools and telling them this school and school A and school B. At the end of the day, the student who goes back with 400, it's a pity, by the way, it's a pity. But I myself, I forwent that particular opportunity of being in a provincial school. Could be also fate, and God may have it, that if I went to that particular provincial school, I could not have passed to go to the university. Sometimes
and I believe CBC is now trying to even the scores now.
Indeed. You see, CBC is good. CBC is about personal development. Challenges will still be there, but personal development. You realize that I went to the 844 proper, the one that we were doing 13 subjects. And of most of them, you had the art and craft, home science, all these very hands-on courses, which will tell you that when I see a painting on the wall, I know this is a mural, this is a collage, this is what you ask the children today. They don't know what you're talking about. So I'm very happy when you have the CBC, because CBC takes us back to the practical education that we are supposed to have. Education is not an exam process where you get in and learn and do exam and go home. At the end of the process, you'd ask yourself, what have you learned? What can you do personally, even if you're not employed? Have you gotten any skill, even if you don't get it? And that is why you see some schools, like I saw in Nakuru, some schools are combining practical education with the theory, making sure that by the time you come out of the Form 4, you can always have a technical skill.
All right, and talking about technical skills, there's something that came up yesterday. I remember Nat, Kupet, Kudea, Wasu, they were protesting about a recommendation that could see the education sector privatized, and talked about this would disadvantage pupils and students from poor backgrounds. And I believe this would resonate well with Kenyans. But what would take for the privatization and the merger of some universities? What would they take? Because I'm quite sure this is something that would need public participation, Kenyans to be involved. And if we see all these education stakeholders quite negative about the privatization of education, then it speaks volumes.
Well, Njue, you will allow me that before I respond directly to that question, perhaps just to touch something very little that Mheshimiwa has mentioned. I know too well that teachers are trained probably in the same, colleges, and they get the certification from the TSC. And probably one will presume that a teacher in a day school, in a district school, will be the same teacher, if you get another one in the national school. But while I was in school, I had the advantage of studying in a national school, and at some point, due to the post-election violence of the year 2007, for some time, I transferred to a provisional school. And then thereafter, I returned back to my national school. And I can tell you for a fact, even as much as these teachers are trained in the same facilities, or they get the accreditation from the same institution, the TSC, when you are in a national school, I mean, you get a different feeling from when you're in a provisional school, and the same thing will apply even when you're in a district school. And probably the best example I can give is you have schools that do not even have the laboratories, the labs. So that if you have an experiment that you are doing probably in a physics class or a chemistry class, you will be less equipped being a learner in a district school or another provisional school as compared to a learner who is in a national school. So I understand where parents are coming from, because every parent will want the best for their children. So that in as much as, and I agree to some extent with Mheshimiwa what he's saying, if you are called to a national school and you do not have the wherewithal, you do not have the finances, you do not have the capacity of getting there, it will be probably best for you at the time being to enroll in that private school or to get to that district school. Yes. But ultimately, I get the discomfort of parents, because if you have the best, you've been called to one of the best schools, and you have that financial incapability. I think it is not also wrong for you to be crying out loud for help so that you can get assistance to go to one of the best schools that are there. So I think that is to the extent of that discussion. Yes. But when you return to the discussion that we had, I saw the Secretary General, Dr. Wesonga. This is also one of my teachers when I was in Maseno School. He taught me history. And I can see the same enthusiasm that he had then. He still has it now. Yes. And I can feel his plight, his concerns. We are told that there is an attempt to privatize some of the national schools or the public universities that we have. There is a fear that if this is allowed, and of course without the public participation, without the people understanding deeply what is this agreement between this private investor and the government, then we might run the risk of turning our public universities into commercial enterprises. And when you turn them into commercial enterprises, then what you're going to do is, again, you will be locking out potential students, people who are good at their craft, people who can be turned into something useful to the society. You will be closing that door, that window of opportunity. Because look at it this way: the public universities that we have provided what is called an open door for people who are needy, but are, they're students who do well in school. So when that door is opened, at least they do not have that, they do not have the barrier of paying hefty school fees. So when you privatize this institution, you make them commercial enterprises, then we will lack some of the Magohas that we had in this country. We will lack some of the Mheshimiwa that we have here, because he is also a product of the university. He benefited largely from the helps that we also got the benefit of getting. So let us be very keen on how we deal with this education sector. I know for some time now, the education sector has been politicized. you mentioned the CBC, you want to mention now you know, the enrollment of students transiting from primary schools to the secondary school. You also want to mention now the privatization of public university. I mean, there has been a lot of debate and politics around this issue. So I think we need to be very careful in how we handle it, how we view it, so that ultimately the promises that we have under Article 43 of ensuring that we have the standard, the highest standard of education being given to the children, or our children, then those promises do not become empty promises. That we ensure that the government of the day gives us this reality, that we will have students, doctors, engineers, professors produced by our national or our public universities. Yes.
And because you have worked as an advisor to the government, and you saw how the stakeholders in the education sector came out strongly, and actually they even threatened mass action if at all that is implemented. Of course, there are a number of steps that would have to be followed before we get to the privatization as it has been mooted.
Yes.
I would like to pick your mind on that. Would you support that, and why wouldn't you as an advisor?
Number one, and I'm not talking as an advisor to the government now, but I'm talking my mind and my experience. Definitely, privatization is not a solution for every problem we have in the country. We have various challenges that are bedeviling our institutions, all the way from management. I think largely management is the one that helps us manage or harness the resources, scarce resources we have, in order to do a big task ahead. But we have a challenge. Like I look at some universities, like look at Nairobi University, where I've gotten nearly 3 degrees from the same university. And I find that with the population of students is now nearly 100,000 active students who are in campus, nearly 100,000. Out of that, the government-sponsored students out of that population would be maybe around, I don't have the correct figures, but it could be working about a third of that. So that means that already 3/4 of the students are already privately sponsored students. I know the fear of the institutions by being privatized is maybe lack of financing and support from the government, which I would suggest that there are many ways to go about it. The third, which is a small population of the government-sponsored student, if these institutions are privatized, they will not afford education at all. Yet, we still have so many other private universities out there. Whoever feels that that agenda of privatization can be carried on, they can sell it to the private universities, but support the public institutions that we have. They are already too few anyway. They are not many. And I think there is already a clamor for every county to have their own public and chartered university. So the dust has not even settled. The journey is too long. We need to educate our people. Of course, not everybody is called upon to have university education, and that is why there is a clamor and a call for the TVET institution, so that at the end of the day we have people. If we want to run industrialization in this country, we need to look more at the TVET institutions. We need to have hands-on and practical and technical graduates at the end of the day, which will not be produced necessarily at the university. We need to meet along the way. But I would feel that management at the end of the day in universities, this is what needs to be checked. There is a law that maybe prohibits the managers of the university from moving forward without consulting the Ministry of Education. So that should be, they should sit down and look and discuss which law particularly, which policy particularly, with the regulators, where are they muzzling the institutions of the universities and prohibiting them and inhibiting from moving forward and achieving the mandate they have. But when it comes to privatization, I would of course not go for it, because I'm a beneficiary of that particular sector, where because of our university being public or institution, there are some collaboration that are there, some level of collaboration that allows the government and the mwananchi to address the public plight. The plight of the public. The mandate of the government is to provide education. So how will they provide education if these institutions are all privatized? How will the government agenda in education also be achieved? Why the government has maintained even institutions like KBC is because of the government agenda. It's not just about money. It's not just about managing. It's not all about profitability. It's about the government agenda in serving the public.
No.
Sometimes if you privatize everything, you will have very little control as a government, even for the agenda of the people and the nation. So we cannot allow that to happen all the time. And I don't think it's good. It is not, it is ill-advised, and it is important for them to reconsider.
And something they also observed yesterday and said that indeed in as much as we would love to privatize everything, not all private companies are doing well.
Yes.
But away from that, I'm quite sure the discussion on education is going to keep on as we also are checking on how the education system is going on and based on the transition, and so much is going to be discussed in the coming days.
Yes.
But away from that, and this is something that you will identify with, is something that you will be actually able to identify well with, is Justice Chitembo's woes. Yesterday, more or less, the tribunal, the Mumbi Ngugi-led tribunal, did hand to the head of state the report and recommended that he be ejected from the judiciary and his work as a judge. Looking at that, he has been a judge for 13 years. I would say he jumped over the first minefield. There is a time he was being investigated, but he was cleared. And 2 years ago, he was in line to be the next CJ, because we saw him in the interviews and we didn't know who was going to be the CJ. Well, the tribunal concluded its work, and now it's only 10 days. In 10 days, if he doesn't appeal, then the head of state will just gazette his exit from the judiciary. I would like you to touch on that, Shadrach.
Well, thank you.
And maybe you can begin why didn't we see, we saw the Masit tribunal.
Yes.
And we actually covered it live, but we were not allowed to cover this Justice Chitembo's tribunal. How is that?
Well, thank you, Ben. Now, one thing you need to understand about the workings of a tribunal is that a tribunal in itself does what is called quasi-judicial functions. So that it's not purely what you witness in court. It's not purely judicial. So that even the rules of procedure are a little bit relaxed. You will not witness what you hear in courts, that you are making an application to dismiss that one, to dismiss that evidence. No, it's some form of an inquisitorial process, because we are in search for the truth. Now, the process of a removal of a judge is in itself one that is governed by the Constitution. If you have a Constitution or a copy, you can check Article 168. It gives you the procedure through which a complaint can be made, which body is to be to receive this complaint, how the process is going to be done. Now, Justice Chitembo was under the Mumbi-led tribunal for his removal. Just like any other tribunal, it has the power and the capacity to come up with its regulations. And one of the regulations, or one of the rules of the regulations that are formed by the tribunals, is that the accused person, the accused judge, is given the liberty or the opportunity of deciding whether he wants a public hearing or a camera hearing. So what you've been seeing with the Masit, the Masit-led tribunal, the one that is recommending or meant to recommend her removal as one of the commissioners of the IEBC, is that she had the right of choosing whether it will be private or public. And she chose for a public hearing, for reasons well known to her. But what it appears from the Chitembo one, the one that was meant to investigate his removal, is that he opted for a secret hearing. And that is one of his rights. But one thing that you need to understand is that even after the secret hearings, the camera hearings, is that ultimately the product becomes a public product. This is why we are discussing. The report
that was handed to President yesterday.
The recommendations now become subject to public discussions. So that once this tribunal has come up with the recommendation to have him removed, is that the accused judge has a window of 10 days through which he can file his direct appeal to the Supreme Court. So that this is so unlike other tribunals, because other tribunals, if you are aggrieved by the decision of a tribunal, you have the normal mechanisms of appeal. Probably you will have to go to the High Court, then after the High Court, you will go to the Court of Appeal, and then subsequently to the Supreme Court. But now, the law is drafted in a manner that the only opportunities where the Supreme Court has the direct appeal or the original jurisdiction to entertain matters. Number one, we know too well, the viewers know too well, that in cases of presidential elections, any person who is aggrieved with the presidential elections goes straight to the Supreme Court. Now, in this case, if you are an accused judge and the tribunal has recommended your removal, then you have also the opportunity of going straight to the Supreme Court to have the issue determined. I mean, this is not... It's not a novel path that we find ourselves walking. No, we've been down that road before. If you review your records, you remember there is a judge, Justice Martin Muya, who had been, the Vistram-led commission, tribunal had recommended his removal for what they termed gross misconduct. So when Justice Martin Muya appealed to the Supreme Court, there was a debate as to whether any misconduct amounts to gross misconduct. And 5 out of the 7 judges arrived at the conclusion that, yes, it was a misconduct of the judge to have delayed for a period of about 5 to 6 months before he delivered the reasons for his ruling. But ultimately they arrived at the conclusion, the majority of them, arrived at the conclusion that, well, in as much as this is a misconduct, it does not amount to a gross misconduct as is stipulated under Article 168. So that even if he did a misconduct, this misconduct is not enough or sufficient to warrant the removal of a judge. And you know, removal of a judge is in itself a very high calling. This is a judge who does not have the opportunity of defending himself with the media, does not have an opportunity of enjoying those the normal procedures that a normal Mwananchi will enjoy before they are removed from office. So after all is said and done, well, the Justice Chitembwe still has the opportunity of redeeming himself. Justice Chitembwe, I've said it even previously in another show, that Justice Chitembwe is not just new to controversy. Remember, at some point, he was removed. He was working for the NSSF, and he was removed on grounds of corruption. But ultimately, after he appealed or he got a recourse in court, he was vindicated.
Cleared,
yes, he was cleared, and that is, after the clearing, that is what now catapulted him to the position that he was enjoying as a High Court judge. So he still has an opportunity. He can vindicate himself, only that now the Supreme Court, having decided on the question of gross misconduct and misconduct, remember some of the grounds, he was actually removed even on another ground for having violated the Judicial Code of Conduct. You know, when he's advising parties who are appearing before him, he's advising parties who want to appeal. Remember, that is not something that is available for judges, because some of these issues can even come before him for determination, assuming he's elevated to the Court of Appeal, because he wanted to become a judge of the Supreme Court and also a judge at the Court of Appeal, a judge of the Supreme Court. So if some of these issues he's advising parties on come to his desk for him to determine, so you see, he throws the judiciary in a very precarious position. So after all is said and done, I think this is what I will be saying in closing on this issue, is that, well, he has 10 days to file his appeal at the Supreme Court. His die is not cast, because the Supreme Court also has an opportunity of deciding whether some of the violations that he's accused of have been met.
Yes, and indeed, you're also a lawyer. You have a background in law, and looking at Justice Chitembwe and of course what the tribunal talked about, the gross misconduct, and he contravened a number of Judicial Code of Conduct. And can, after the 10 days, of course the president, from the law, is that the president cannot do anything in the 10 days. All the president has to do, if at all, Chitembwe does not have an opportunity to maybe file something at the Supreme Court. He just has to gazette that the removal of Chitembwe. I would like you to touch on that, and also what reprieve does he have as a judge, and now he only has 10 days.
Thank you so much. But I want to diverge a bit, and I want to use this matter to mention on a number of things. Things to do with corruption in the justice system. Bwana Joy, you'll allow me to mention that corruption in itself is founded on the tenets of the society, the very foundation of the society. What you do and what you don't do.
Kindly hold the thought, Wanyeki. And I'm informed that the procession the late Professor George Magoha procession has just at the Lee Funeral Home, and we have Ruth Wamboi, who has been keeping tabs with what is happening. Ruth, if you can hear me, good morning, and kindly bring us up to speed.
Offices where the procession for the late professor, the former education cabinet secretary, was just here. His body has just been here for just to pay his tribute on the fallen hero. The body left at Lee Funeral Home at exactly 9:40 a.m. Then from there it headed to University of Nairobi College of Health Sciences. Now the body just arrived here at the KMPDC complex offices, where the colleagues here who worked with him paid tribute to him. From here, the procession will head to the Nigerian High Commission. As my cameraman can see you, the procession now is heading to the Nigerian High Commission, where it also played a very critical role during his life, whereby he schooled at the University of Lagos in Nigeria. So taking his body for the last moment at the Nigerian High Commission is so critical for the late Professor George Magoha. I'm following up on the procession and will update our viewers on the details as they unfold. Back to you, Ben Troinjue.
Thank you, Ruth Wamboi there, and we are keeping a keen eye on that report as we pay the last respect to the late Professor. Thank you so much, Ruth Wamboi, and allow me now to get back to our live discussion now. And we have been looking at Justice Chitembwe's tribunal yesterday did hand a report to the head of state that recommended his removal based on a number of factors, talking about gross misconduct. And I have two experts here, all happen to have a background in law, and that is why Wanyeki was asking what reprieve do the judge has. Yes. And the president does not have any hand in this. He cannot do anything. He's tied by the law. Yes. He only have to wait for the 10 days. Yes. And then after that, he gazettes that the judge has been removed. Yes. Yes. So I was seeking your indulgence to diverge a bit into the practice of law within the judiciary. And I was saying that when you talk of corruption, is the do's and don'ts within a society. What are we agreeing should be done? What are we agreeing should not be done at the end of the day? And the people responsible for determination of what should be done and what should not be done are the legal practitioners. These particularly are the judges, the magistrate, and people practicing government authority, whether in government service or so forth. At the end of the day, you realize that the people you have entrusted and the mode of appointment for our magistracy, the people who practice and dispense justice, this a problem we usually have with that particular setup. If you check, like in the West, the people who do even the law degree in itself, you don't do law as a first degree in most cases. In most states, you do law as a second degree. That is to allow you, because justice is so sacred. Justice is so supreme. And it's so dear to the day-to-day livelihoods of people. Then at the end of the day, that means that even the practitioners, the people handling the justice system, and this very precious topic of justice, must be people who are above board in everything they do. They must be unquestionable. They must be people who cannot be raised in any other way or coerced to do against what the law is supposed to be followed. And so at the end of the day, you realize, if I finish campus after my 4th year, 6th year now with the law diploma at Kenya School of Law, and the next thing on the 7th year, you are appointed as a magistrate. At the same time, you look at, we have an engineer you are in the same class with, maybe in the university, and he's also appointed maybe as an engineer, a resident engineer in a construction company and so forth. You realize that first, the age and the type of education that these people are given is a big problem. Then you realize that the remuneration also, for me, would add up to a big problem, especially on the public practice and the private practice of law. Because at the end of the day, I look at the judges when they are seated and the magistrate,
And the advocates on this other side, what is called the bar and the bench, when they face each other, the bar is being paid by the client in most cases, and at their terms in most cases. They set their own terms in most cases. But the bench, they wait maybe for their salary at the end of the day. So this is a sitting that is unequal for the same process of judicial dispensation, and it is unfair for me, because I find that either the law should allow introduction of some of these allowances, sitting allowances, for magistrates, for judges, even when they are sitting. They should be giving sitting allowances. That is one. Let me finish. That is, you know, we are looking at corruption. Because the case of Justice Chitembwe, we are looking at where did the rain start beating the judge? Where is corruption so prevalent in this particular case? Where are we talking about corruption? So at the end of the day, if you realize that, then the people who are doing this particular practice of law, if it's an engineer, they have a very good package. The magistrate on the other hand, you are too young, you are too green, then you are entrusted with a very precious in court justice. You still have, you have a life to live, you have a house to pay rent, you have a car, you don't want to walk in the same matatus that you are going to bring them.
As a magistrate or as a judge, you have an option to be corrupt or not.
Precisely. Yes. But you see, the choice, there are forces in the world. Why are you working? You are working because being a judge or a magistrate is a job in itself. Don't forget.
Yes.
It's not just a calling. It's a job. You've been trained in it, and you are a profession in it. So, and a job is supposed to help you in your livelihood. You are supposed to earn from it. You are supposed to do everything from it, just like you do. So magistrates and judges are no exception. The advocates do it and they earn from it. So the judges, there must be a way that the Judicial Service Commission must review the terms of judges in a way or the other. And I don't associate that earnings and corruption are related. But there is a way and a window that is very prevalent to being manipulated because of that particular issue. I go back to Justice Chitembwe's case. Being a judge is very hard and very difficult. And I would feel that, and my advice to the judge, also losing the job should not be very easy. He has a window, the legal constitutional window of 10 days to appeal. I would suggest he runs in the morning to court. He should run to the Supreme Court and make an appeal. The law has allowed him. And you see, on the other hand, let me tell you one thing. Being a judge does not exonerate you from being a family person. All these issues bedeviling Justice Chitembwe are coming from family. And you agree?
In as much as we would like to touch on that,
yes,
this is not the first time that this guy is being investigated. And actually, the last time he had to appeal so that he got the reprieve that he got. You remember, even he was crying when he was being interviewed for the CJ position because of that case. Yes. But said and done, this one is a clear show that indeed this guy was has done that, because the tribunal has indeed recommended his removal. They have not even talked about his investigation or anything, or some of the capability, but they have recommended his removal. If he has to go, he has to go.
I would like to be his advocate. I would say one thing, and whether being his advocate is devil's advocate, I don't care. Number one, everybody is guilty in the face of the law. There is nobody who can stand in the face of the law. Everyone has something, a black spot within the practice of the law. Whether you are the mwananchi or the judge dispensing the judge, everybody has it. It's only that some attention and some light is shed on a particular degree. Even my colleague here, he'll agree with me. At the end of the day, let's agree. Because the issues that are, and that's why I was bringing the family aspect. The very case between Sonko and Chitembwe, you know, is a family affair. These people are family.
Let's narrow it down to the report.
Yes. If you look at the report, you can see this issue of Sonko being narrowed down to at the family level. And if Chitembwe today, as you are saying that in the past he has gotten through the noose, over the noose over some time, I would also say he can also be the proverbial cat with 9 knives. Let him go for it. Let him go to
So you recommend, you would, if at all he gave you a call today, you will tell him, my friend,
yes, we are late.
Just go.
We are late.
We are late.
Yes.
We have 9 days now.
Everybody is guilty.
All right.
Not everybody has clean hands. Okay. Let people challenge the decision also to take them out. He has a constitutional right.
He has 2 options.
Let's defend it.
He has 9 days now to appeal. And I'm quite sure, Wambo, you have some say in this. what are some of the reprieve that he can get other than can the Supreme Court vindicate him?
Yes.
And
yes.
after all is all said and done, if at all after the 10 days he doesn't appeal and he is ejected from the judiciary, can somebody instigate criminal proceedings against him? Now, because he will be just a normal citizen. Because from what we read from the report, these are quite damaging for his career.
Yes, let me begin by at least laying some little basis. When you read the report finds him guilty on occasions or scenarios. One that happened during the hearing of the petition that ultimately confirmed the impeachment of Sonko by the Senate. That is on one hand. So that the tribunal looks at, I mean, this is a judge who was related to the party appearing before the court, or at least they have some degree of consanguinity. They have a relationship, or either coming from marriage or whatever. So that with that in itself, the judge was duty bound to make that disclosure.
Or recuse himself.
Yes, or recuse himself. And you know, these are issues of conflict of interest. Because we cannot be interviewing you for a job and we are related with you. Because ultimately the finding is likely to be biased. Then again, during that hearing, it is said that there was some communication about the proceedings of the court between the judge and the Honorable Sonko. So to that extent, the tribunal finds that he is guilty of gross misconduct and again breaching the Judicial Code of Conduct. There is also another issue, because this tribunal came up with, it's about 200 pages recommendation.
262.
Yes, 262. So that even in this recommendation, again, there is an issue arising from Malindi. There is a land in which he is a beneficiary and he had a say in that case. So that in itself does not augur very well. So due to some of these accusations or allegations, the tribunal finds that there is enough grounds to have the judge removed from office. So when you want to look at I mean whether he should appeal or not, again, it's a question of the framing or an understanding of some of the issues that he might be uncomfortable with. Remember, when a tribunal sits, there is a question of procedural justice and substantive justice. So that the substance is what we are discussing. The reasons why they have recommended his removal. Some of us little understand of the procedure that has led to his removal from office. So that if you ask me, I mean, one will make a case. There are so many complaints as against other judges that have been pending. Why is it that this one has been given some priority hearings? What is so unique about this case? Is there some fault in the manner in which the tribunal conducted itself, that we can, in as much as the substance is correct, we can look at the product of that process as being unjust as far as the recommendation is concerned? So what am I saying in a nutshell is that when you look at the procedure must be as just as the final outcome. So that if the procedure in itself has some fault, the judge has enough grounds to go and appeal at the Supreme Court and get some reprieve. Remember, when we take issues to court, it is not just a question of taking issues just for the sake of determination. This is a Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has a certain special mandate under the Supreme Court Act. It is to help us to shape the jurisprudence of this country. It is to help us to grow what is called some local jurisprudence that is going to assist us moving forward. When they determine a case, they do not only determine it depending on the people who are appearing before them. No, they look at a determination that is going to transcend into the future. To going to affect some other people who are going to, to find themselves in that situation. So when the Supreme Court is called upon to determine some of these concerns, it is a good thing for this country. So that I will encourage from where I sit, Justice Chitembwe, if he has good counsel, if they have formed very good grounds of appeal, then they should write that petition of appeal, take it to the Supreme Court, so that the Supreme Court can have an opportunity of guiding us moving into the future.
Precisely.
Yes, so it is not a question of Justice Chitembwe himself having been removed from office. It is a question of the future of this country. And again, Njue, I think it is too late for him to be throwing in the towel. If he did not want to be subjected to that process, if he's gotten all this far just to surrender at this point in time, I think that is a very bad thing for him to have done to himself.
But somebody would say that he will go with his head held high, because if at all the tribunal recommended his removal, and now he goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court affirms that and says, yes, indeed, we have proved beyond any reasonable doubt that the tribunal was right, and now you have to go.
No, his head is not high. I mean, that recommendation does not leave his head high. In any event, if he has somewhere he can hide it, he should be hiding it by now. Because the report is so damning. So that if you ask me, the best opportunity that he had was to tender his resignation before the recommendations of the tribunal were even released. So that in the future he will have come back and said, you see, the tribunal did not have an opportunity of deciding my fate. So I can also be given the benefit of doubt that had they entertained the complaint, probably they would have dismissed it. They would not have recommended my removal. You understand? So when the recommendation has been made that he ought to be removed from office, I think he will be shooting himself on the feet if he does not sit down, thoroughly relook the recommendations of the tribunal, and thoroughly prepare his grounds to go and take them to the Supreme Court. Imagine if Justice my Lord Martin Muya had just surrendered his fate and said, you know, the Justice retired Justice Visram's tribunal, you know, when they recommended his removal for gross misconduct, if he just threw in the towel and surrendered and said, I mean, well, I just want to just leave it at that, we will not have had the opportunity of the Supreme Court justices, 5 of them, agreeing that in as much as there was misconduct, that in itself does not amount to gross misconduct. So when we have an opportunity of experimenting what the law provides is important. And again, I must say this, at least for the benefit of the viewers. I know the wordings of the Constitution is written in a manner that suggests that the President does not have an alternative, does not have a recourse in the recommendation that has been made, that he just has to rubber stamp it and now recommend the removal. But previously we have had justices in the High Court, particularly when you want to speak about Justice G.V. Odunga, who has now been elevated to the Court of Appeal. He had an opportunity some time back of analyzing and interpreting what the word shall means in law. And he said that even while it is written shall, does not necessarily means mandatory. So when we have an opportunity, when judges have opportunities of interpreting the law, it is important that we give them the opportunity. They might come up with some recommendations that we will be wowed by those recommendations.
All right, and when we come back, you will tell us whether anybody can be instituting criminal proceedings against the judge, if at all, after 10 days he will not have appealed and he is exited from the judiciary. Well, we now cross over to the Pride Inn Hotel in Mombasa, where the Senate Standing Committee on Finance and Budget is holding and planning a retreat this week in regards to the overview of the budget process. And currently speaking is Professor Njuguna Ndungu, the CS Treasury. Let's listen in.
I've done some critical works in this area, is to say, how do you get there and avoid institutional failure problem? So once we have the credit scores, then we can actually make sure that our hustlers increase the credit scores. It will be the tail that wags the dog. I remember I used the same words when we started M-Pesa. And I said, this is an intervention that is going to discipline the market. And especially in Hustler Fund, when we move to the next stages, there are about 4 stages. We are just on the first stage. And you can see the successes. The most important thing is that those who are borrowing 300 times, they are borrowing for business, isn't it? It's not for consumption, because you can't churn consumption, but you can churn business, isn't it? And if you're making some value addition, and every time savings, it means that on one side, by now, I think I saw about 875 million savings that have gone into them. Every time you can imagine, if you add 8.9 billion plus 875 savings, you can see we are all coming close to the figures that we started with. So essentially, the leakage is very, very minimal. And that is something that we didn't need to look at. When we focus on our core group of hustlers, those are the people who crime. By the way, I said it is an intervention. Why is it an intervention? It will remain at the bottom of the pyramid. Let people move up, isn't it? It's different from when we started microfinance. We thought it will remain, microfinance institutions will remain at the bottom. But as soon as the microfinance CEOs were sat down with a tie and they started looking upwards, they decided they should not be there. They should be somewhere else. But they left everybody below, isn't it? So an intervention should make sure that it remains where it is targeted. So the hustler fund will remain there. It will also show that the developments in the market will follow that. By the way, it's just a matter of time, Chairman, to see so many interventions, so many other private sector models coming and sticking to the bottom, isn't it? This is the reaction in markets. Investments in markets, we always say there's hardening behavior. You find people now coming and focusing there because that's where the groups are, isn't it? When you start seeing 300 when we started the first few weeks, we all climbed to about 300 transactions per second. That is not a small figure, isn't it? Those transactions are many. But the most important thing is, I just wanted to emphasize interventions. What are the interventions supposed to do? They're supposed to be catalytic to the business that you're going to create. Anyway, we can talk about that. I'm sure there are things that we can talk about. By the way, you need also to borrow. I borrow from the hustler fund every week because I want to make sure that by the time they come up with a whole computation of credit scores, I'm part of the game, isn't it? The president was giving an example that somebody who just sends his driver to send money. So when it comes to, when you go *254# and you are rated small because you don't transact. So this guy was saying the driver was rated very high and he was rated very low in terms of how much you can borrow. Because it is also looking at your credit, as your transactions history, isn't it? And after that, it's also looking at your savings history. So I also borrow every week and pay back the other week just to make sure that, one, I have savings, they are parked somewhere. And the second thing is that I'm going to have some credit scores to improve on, isn't it? With that, we are going to change the collateral technology. You don't have to go, bring fixed investments. No. For me, the collateral technology in Africa has inhibited the growth of credit market for many decades. Start from the 60s, Go to a bank and try to borrow. And then you're told to bring a fixed assets because that's the tradition, that's the correct. They have to perfect it, and they have all manner of things. By the time you get to where you wanted, you're already given up, isn't it? So if you change that collateral technology, that at a button of the key of the computer you get your results, you'll be very happy. Anyway, that we can talk about that until cows come home. But the most important thing is I wanted to emphasize the role of interventions where it has the most value addition and impact. Then we come to the ministry, and that is the National Treasury and the Economic. Article 225, Section 1 of the Constitution of Kenya. And the National Treasury, through the Act of Parliament, also stipulates the functions and responsibilities. And this has been actualized again by additional acts. For example, the Public Finance Management Act of 2012, and also provides the responsibilities and powers in respect to public financial management, fiscal and budget preparation, and the execution and responsibilities and functions.
Live from the coastal city of Mombasa, on your screen is Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, the National Treasury CS there having a session with the Senate Standing Committee on Finance and Budget that is led by or chaired by Mandera Senator Honorable Ali Roba, and talking about the budget making process. And we do expect fireworks this coming weeks because both houses, as the National Assembly and the Senate, are expected to come back on Tuesday and Wednesday. And of course, there's something that they will be touching on that is touching on all Kenyans, that is the budget. They already have a supplementary budget that we'll be discussing here when we get back. Let's have a quick break. We'll be right back.
How come it's so sour?
It's sour? Mm-hmm. Weird. Mine was sour this morning too. I still don't know what it means.
He's such a weirdo. Maya's guinea pig? Oh no.
The day when you broke the glass.
Broke what glass?
Nothing. Forget it.
Mr. Bai, I changed all of this.
What do you want? I really need to speak with you. I have a question for you.
I'll send it back by mail, all right?
It has to be printed, but I won't be in the laboratory.
So where do you want me to bring it then?
Well, you could bring it to my house.
Rodrigo, considering the circumstances, I don't think that's appropriate.
You can just leave it and then go. And tell that veterinarian to come here. I want to see him.
What do you want with him?
Nothing that has to do with you, my dear. I just want him to examine the animals that I bought. Sweetie, where are you going?
To the fields!
Ruben! Go with Amparo.
Frankly, I can go by myself, Daddy. Nobody needs to come with me.
Go on, just go with her.
That woman came here to tell my father everything that Rodrigo Irazabal was thinking. Nanny, they're preparing to sue Dad about the land.
My goodness, not again.
You and I, buddy. It's time for us to resolve our unfinished business.
It's the third round of the DFB Pokal, a mini Revere derby in the DFB Cup.
Ici for Mukoko! Lozier's in there and scores!
This is an old-school raw pot battle. 5-time winners against 2-time finalists.
Fantastic save from Gregor Kobel.
The raw pot battle, only one can go through.
Enjoy a selection of the best. Regina Ray and Tingazi.
Bado hujamwambia unamlike. Umerealize hujamwachilia mkono kutoka nikuje hapa.
Love blossoms in Mexico with the Trier sisters in Las Bandidas.
I beg you, please don't go.
I want you to be the happiest man in the world with a woman who appreciates and respects you.
An array of music crave.
Make me lie when I don't want to.
Blues.
You are my everything.
Two local gems. And we sit to chat with the Diambo.
You know, I can't even tell whether you're looking at me, seeing me. With the Louis Vuitton.
Classic comedy.
Makono tu.
Say that again.
Enjoy the Divas programming this February only on KBC Channel 1. Kenya's watching.
Welcome back to KBC News Check, and we are continuing with our coverage of the state of current affairs in the nation. We have touched on a little bit on the CBC. We have also touched on Justice Chitembwe, who yesterday, a tribunal that was set up by the former president. Now, yesterday, they did give the Kenyans what they were expecting, a report. And in that report, they said this judge should be removed from office. And he still has 10 days right of reply at the apex court, that is the Supreme Court. We see and wait to see how that pans out. Moments earlier, we had a discussion there in regards to the National Assembly and the Senate. On Tuesday 14th is when the houses, both houses, are going to be having sessions after the long December recess. And some of the things that have been touched on is the budget making process. President William Ruto talking about reduction on recurrent expenditure by over 300 billion, which is a lot of people may argue is quite a stretch, but we are waiting to see how that pans out. And still in the supplementary budget, they have set aside some money to deal with the drought mitigation. But before we do that, the politics around each and every national and the Senate. Yesterday, we did see some ODM members of parliament in State House, and some of the ODM leaders, and I'm mentioning the Governor Siaya, James Orengo, and also we had Governor Kisumu, Nyang' Nyong'o, saying that the MPs who had a sitting with President William Ruto yesterday, they went there on their own personal accord, and that was not, they didn't have the blessings of the party. But that has also generated a lot of heat. A couple of weeks back, we saw Jubilee leaders also have a sitting with the president at State House. And if you haven't noticed, during this Azimio consultative forums, as they like to call them, those Jubilee members of parliament do not attend that. And we have seen some of the members who were in the consultative meetings, and especially in Kibra on Sunday, they were at State House yesterday. That has generated a lot of debate. Allow me to rope in my panel of experts, and I'll begin with you, Bashiba, because you have also touched a lot on politics and you've also been in government as well. Yes. What do you make of what the president is doing? He had a sitting with the Azimio, the Jubilee Azimio faction. Now he has the ODM Azimio faction. Are we likely to even see the Wiper Azimio faction and other political parties having a sit down in parliament, in a State House? Yes, indeed, we do accept that president is a symbol of national unity. But at the end of the day, there also the politics of the day. And we also have opposition. Yes. And we also have democracy. These are all things that are panning out in this saga. Yes. What do you make of it?
Thank you so much. I would touch on the issue of the definition of presidency. Mm-hmm. There is a difference between the president and the occupant of the office of the president. These are two different people. The presidency is that symbol, that office that represents the national unity. That both the opposition and government must be unified at the presidency. So that means when we have the opposition, the Azimio, the Jubilee, the ODM, the UDA, all of them being under the umbrella of the presidency, it means that is the unity that the presidency is supposed to represent. That indeed, you are all, as the president has been saying, even the opposition are doing work of the government. Because that is the difference. Because governance is not just the government agenda, it's also representation. So the people who are in the opposition, that is just a party. But the mandate they wake up to every day is serving the electorate. And that's the work of the government. And that is why there are MPs who are in the opposition and others in the government, but they all wake up to fulfill the government agenda on the people that have elected them. They are all serving under the same unifying house. If you mean presidency, you also go to the assembly. Everybody. We don't have Azimio as assembly. Neither do we have UDA assembly. We don't have Azimio presidency. Neither can we have UDA presidency. It is the president of the Republic of Kenya. That allows him to serve the expectation of every individual citizen of the country, whether he elected leader A or leader B or himself, or whether he didn't even appoint him. Because now that's the definition of individual as a person or as a president, and the president who is the occupier of that national symbol. At the end of the day, the president who is sworn in, he is sworn in on behalf of the rest of us.
But looking at that, Mheshimiwa,
yes.
In other previous government, we've seen if you're aligning yourself with either the government or the opposition, there is even some who have been whipped because they are not furthering the agenda of the opposition.
Yes.
Actually, still in line with that, tomorrow there is a must attend. That is exactly how they put it. ODM said tomorrow is a must attend meeting. And the minority leader was quick to say that it's what more or less a PGM meeting that we are having. And we do not want to whip anyone. And everything is fine. But the pundits are arguing that this is one of the ways of streamlining, and especially ODM MPs. There are some who will have many questions to be answering tomorrow.
Now, number one, when you are elected as a member of parliament in an opposition ticket, you make promises to dispense and serve and fulfill those promises on behalf of the people from the resources, not from your pocket. Neither are they from the party ticket, even if it's from the ODM. You use the resources provided for by the government. The very government. If you have CDF, the CDF will come from the government because it is under the public good that you are supposed to utilize it for the people of your constituency or the people that have elected you. In the same way, if you have mass action, remember you have elected leaders, but you also have the party leader. The party leader has a duty to maintain his house and put it in order and where it belongs. If there will be any negotiation, remember, it is still the party leader who will negotiate, not with the MPs from whichever side, but with the leader of the other side. And until that time comes, I don't foresee any end to pickling and any aid to some of these expressions. They are democratic, they are legitimate, and they are legal. And the government has clearly allowed it because it's a constitutional provision. It is not an expression by an individual. It's a provision constitutional for expression of either displeasure or appreciation by the particular leaders who are calling people to the street. There is a provision for that, and that is why you see the government is ready even to provide boundaries. Because if they are pickling, The government's work is to provide security to property owners and to people who don't want to picker, they want to go about their business. And also, it's government work to protect the very people who are pickering. So you can see it's a very thin line, but it's a constitutional provision.
Okay, and Wamboi, there have been calls to establish the office of the leader of the official opposition. That is not enshrined in the constitution, but the MPs have the mandate and they can do that. What would it take to have the office of the leader of official opposition? And now, because the leader would definitely be Raila Odinga, and he has said very well, I do not want that office. How does that pan out?
Well, the system of governance that we have is one that the leader takes it all. It is otherwise called the first past the post kind of system. Now, what the BBI that failed attempted to do or to achieve was to introduce an office where the one that becomes number 2, now the official leader of the opposition, has an office that that supports his mandate as the official opposition. So, and this is why even our viewers and listeners will hear on a number of occasions when the president mentions that he wants to form an office for the official opposition, there is always a rebuttal or a reply from the other end by the retired Raila Amolo Odinga, the Prime Minister, when he says that if you want to introduce that office, then you are introducing BBI, so you need to introduce that BBI. There is a sense in which Raila Amolo Odinga is usually correct when he says that. So that the introduction of that office essentially means the introduction of some of the proposals that were proposed through the BBI, the Building Bridges Initiative bill. Now, responding quite directly to what you've asked, is that number one, you know the politics that we have in this country, and when I listen to Mheshimiwa speak, Mheshimiwa speaks very good theoretically, but when it comes to the practical bit of it, we recognize that we have party politics. We recognize that we have individuals who are taken to be, community chiefs, and once they place their hands on top of your head, the community that follows them do not have any obligation, do not have any other choice but to choose you. So that this is to say that we have people who are deemed to be sponsors. And when you get, like for example, when you get a ticket from this sponsor, you are meant to be acting in a manner that, of course, praises or shows appreciation to the sponsor. I mean, that is just common sense. If it is KBC that is sponsoring this program, it does not make sense to be bringing other brands from other royal media stations or other media stations to come here and advertise what they have been doing. So it just makes ordinary sense. And that is why you will get this discomfort arising from some political quotas that, I mean, you are chosen or elected under the ODM party ticket or the Azimio ticket. So if you are chosen under that ticket, then you will rise with Azimio or you will fall with Azimio. So that is usually the understanding. And the framers of the Constitution knew it too well, that we have that kind of party politics. And that is why they introduced what is called an independent candidate. So that if you don't want to be aligned to a certain ideological kind of thinking, if you do not want to be whipped or face the threat of being whipped, then what you need to do is just participate in the electoral process as an independent candidate. If you win, well and good. If you lose, too sad. So because of that initiative, then we have people, because there is the Political Parties Act, and the Political Parties Act is meant to govern the relationship between the member of that political party and the party itself. Because if it is seen that you are supporting the ideologies of other political parties, then the leadership of your political party have the power in law to institute a process of your removal as a member of that political party. And once you've been removed from that political party, of course, through the process that is usually done at the Register of Political Parties, once you've been removed as a member, then you cannot enjoy the position, the elective position that you achieved or you gained. So that once you've been removed as a member of ODM, then you will automatically be losing your seat as a member of parliament of ODM. In essence, you will cause what is called a by-election. Once you cause the by-election, then now it means you will now go and run as an independent candidate. So these are some of the risks that these people face.
And they really avoid that because a lot of them have become leaders because of the wave that is perhaps in one of the regions.
Yes, yes. And you know, one thing, Ben, is that, you know, the current constitutional dispensation has created a system where you do not necessarily have to be seen to be aligned to the president because you want development. No, we are past those things. I mean, we have a constitutional dictate that says we have funds that need to be devolved from the national kitty so that we have at least 15% going to devolution.
Yeah.
So you do not necessarily have to be seen to be aligned to the president. You just need to support your political party. If you don't want to support your political party, then you run the risk of being whipped by your political party. So that is the danger that some of these people, the likes of Jalango, Mheshimiwa, faces when he is seen to be aligned to the President William Ruto. And again, I say it with some shyness, because I recognize, as Mheshimiwa had mentioned, that the president is not only the leader or affiliated to the United Democratic Alliance, the UDA. No, he is, constitutionally speaking, he's a symbol of national unity. So that when we see people allied or allied to the Azimio One Kenya Alliance, it should not cause so much of a surprise to us. But again, he's the same individual, the president, who plays the administrative role as the president and also plays the politics as the leader of UDA. So it is difficult to distinguish between when he's playing the politics and when he's playing, the role of the head of state.
Yes, and I'm quite sure, Mheshimiwa, you have something to respond to that. Yes. And still on that, isn't it a way, as some have argued, a way of weakening the opposition? Why is this? Looking at after the meeting that they had, the Jubilee MPs with the president, none of the Jubilee MPs, despite Jubilee being part of Azimio, has been seen in these consultative forums or barazas, as they like to put it. And looking at what happened yesterday, I'm quite sure there are some members of parliament you will not see, and we haven't seen in these Azimio consultative meetings. This could be interpreted like a way of, or a plot to weaken the opposition. And a good example is just after the election. You remember the UDM MPs?
Yes, I remember.
And all of them now, they are firmly and squarely in government. This could be interpreted as more or less like weakening the opposition and democracy in the country.
Yes, thank you. What you need to acknowledge is that leadership has to have controls. You must know which button to touch when. And you must know which one makes more noise than the other one. So that you touch the correct button at the right time. Not all the time, at the right time. And presidency is the same. As my colleague is saying here, that indeed you don't know when the president wears the political hat and wears the administrative hat as a president of the Republic of Kenya, who is the president to everybody else. So what happens that the politics of the day and the political party is one button that has to be put right. Making sure that, remember, there was the issue of the numbers in both houses. And so number one responsibility for the president was to make sure that the button that touches on the majority is within his reach. The button that controls the business of the house is within his reach. So controlling the issue of speaker, leader of majority, and so forth must be on the reach of the president, who holds the resources. Now, what happens that when he suggested that there will be the official or establishment of the office of the leader of opposition, as a political scientist, I'll look at it in two ways. It has a plus and a minus. A plus is that you are the expenditure of the office and the activities of the opposition are accounted for in the national budget. So they put under the fiscal budget. And so any activity that you do will be put under the fiscal budget. But then the minus is here. The minute you start receiving from the national government, there is a proverb that says, he who pays the piper plays the tune. That is a huge control on the activities of the opposition. And that is why there is a tactical retreat by the leader of opposition to make sure that, yes, you have control also, because you also need controls. Raila Amolo Odinga is one person who is a constituency by himself. He can raise his own funds. He does not need state funding. You understand? Apart from his nitty-gritty being that respectable man and not citizen that we respect in Kenya, which he needs to be taken care of by the government, there is now the practical part of the opposition and politics, which you not like it controlled by anybody. His movement, his for instance, correction, how much donation he is receiving in the opposition and so forth. And the government would like to put tabs on this thing. Like to know how much is he receiving to sponsor rallies, who is sponsoring Kamukunji, who is sponsoring this one. The government would get a plus on it. But Baba knows it very well. Raila knows that if this happens, then indeed his hands are tied. And so it's a good thing. And that is why in the Constitution, we entirely cannot say that the winner take it all. Because the Constitution allowed the leadership of the minority parties within the government to be taken care of. All the leaders of the minority parties, including minority whips, they have government offices, and they have all facilities and services that goes to their fully fledged office, including the staff. The only person who was not addressed by the Constitution is the leader of opposition, assuming he does not come from the parliament or he's not in the house. He is left there. And that problem we found it with the Kalonzo, you know, and when the last person served as Uhuru Kenyatta to be the leader of opposition, who was already inside the house. So, but when now we had the NASA and Raila is out here, he is a leader of opposition, and he has no particular office. So there was that part in the BBI that needed to incorporate it as an office. But the dangers, as I've seen, are very clear. That the minute you do that, you controlled. Your budget is streamlined. It is also discussed. So you cannot pick and clamor around.
And maybe so that's why the Baba has declined.
Precisely, yes, of course. He doesn't want to be controlled. The minute he starts receiving funds from the state, automatically he will be controlled by the state. Any other person, maybe any other leader of opposition in future may not have a problem. But for the doyen of politics, the enigma in politics, in the name of Honorable Raila Odinga, I don't think he'll accept. And also, it's not wise for him. Yeah.
And there's something else that has come up when we mentioned Baba and what we have seen in these rallies or consultative barazas, as they like to put it, is that they have mentioned that the former president, and I remember leader of majority talking about the former president should keep away from politics so that he may continue enjoying the benefits of a retired president. And President Uhuru's name has been dragged into these rallies as being one of the financiers. And this is something that we will hear always in politics. And he has decided to lay low. Only just saying what he should always say. And pundits have argued that we could be weaponizing a good deed, that is tax collection. And this is a discussion that is still picking up steam on how we should pay taxes, these tax exemption, A, B, C, D. What does the law exactly say in terms of taxes and exemptions? Because we hear that in some business transaction, in law, you can be exempted from paying some certain types of taxes. Kindly shed light on that.
Yes. Now,
because we could be weaponizing it.
Yes, thank you, Ben. You know, there is one thing, the beauty about our law, particularly when you read Article 27, is the promotion of equality. We are told that we are all equal before the law, and all of us must enjoy the benefits of the law. So that is a good place to start with. So that, well, it is expected ordinarily that all of us will be paying taxes and all of us will participate meaningfully into the growth of our democracy. So that when you find a pothole somewhere, you will have the right to complain because you are a taxpayer. But some of us lack that right of complaining because they have never, or they do not participate in the growth or development of this country. In any event, they are the people who've been drinking our blood. The people who enjoy things that some of us work very hard to ensure that the government is able or in a position to provide. Now, there is, when you look at tax, especially tax law, you will want to understand tax in two different ways. There is the evasion of tax and there is the avoidance of tax. And there is also when you are given the exemption in paying taxes. Now, evasion of tax is in itself a criminal offense. It's wrong. You should not be evading taxes because you have a responsibility. I mean, this is your country. Even in your own house, you pay your accommodation, you ensure that you iron, you do the laundry, you eat, you buy your own food. So if this country is to sustain itself, because we have employed people, we have employed the President, William Ruto, we've employed the Deputy President, we've employed even parliamentarians to do what? To represent us. Because all of us cannot be in that house to be arguing matters that are affecting us. So if you've employed them, it makes sense for you to be paying your employer, your employee, sorry. So that ultimately, when you call to question some of their misconduct or their misdeeds, after 5 years, you will have the right of saying, we've been paying you from our taxpayers, our taxpayers' money, so you did not do X or Y. So that is to the extent why tax evasion in itself is a bad thing. But tax avoidance is not a bad thing. Avoiding to pay taxes is not a bad thing in law. In any event, you are encouraged because there are situations that call that for you to also invest more in the things that you are doing, you should avoid paying taxes. If you are supposed to be importing so many things in different containers, you import them in one container. I mean, there is no problem with that. You will have avoided. Yes, you will have consolidated those taxes, and there is nothing totally wrong, legally speaking, from that. There is the question of tax evasion, the tax exemption. Tax exemption is not entirely a bad thing. I know this is an avenue where people misuse this avenue for their own self, aggrandizement. So that for selfish reasons, they want to benefit themselves, which is a bad thing. But tax exemption sometimes is used as a tool to motivate the growth of a country, the growth of the economy of a country.
But so what happens when it involves individuals? Because we're quite sure in some of the tax exemptions, Kenyans are not going to benefit from that money.
No, it is meant to benefit this individual. You remember, it's a sort of enticement. It's an encouragement. Probably we are having an investor we want to invite to the country. We want to encourage him to be in the country. So we will tell him you will be exempted on 1, 2, 3 things. And when he does his calculation, because he's an investor, he's a business person. So when he does his calculation, he sees, from this exemption, then I will be benefiting. Now, from that benefit, of course, he will be drawing the benefit. But most of us, we are crying of unemployment rates, higher unemployment rates. You see, when this investor comes to the country, he will now provide employment to some of our brothers and sisters who've been relying on us for support. So it is in itself not a very bad thing. But there are instances which we must be very careful as a country. We must be very careful because there are people who are using the law. Remember, this is a tool given by the law. So you can use the law to manipulate the system so that you can get some selfish advantage. But that is why we have courts in the first place. If you know the law, the constitution, particularly if you read Article 22, it has given us an opportunity. Anybody, including people who are not directly aggrieved, they can go and file their petitions in court. And that is why you've been seeing Okia Omtata during his heyday, the senator for Busia. He was filing petitions. We have Sheria Mtaani, an organization I'm also in charge of, that has been filing this public interest litigation, PIL cases. So that if you see that there is an abuse of office, an abuse of power, if there is a law that has been made without public participation, that is in itself meant to claw back the gains that we are getting as a country and as a people, then you have the opportunity of approaching the courts. The courts will listen to you, will render that law or that exemption, if it is made in bad faith, to be unconstitutional or illegal. So really, even while we are demonizing some things, even while we recognize that there could be some ills in some of the things that people are proposing, we still have the avenues of law to go and take those issues or discussions before the court for the court to determine. But we cannot just throw the baby with the bath water.
All right. Well, it's talked about exemption, tax avoidance, and tax evasion.
Yes.
Those are quite a handful. And still on that, because we are expecting a lot of fireworks when our MPs and the senators end their recess next week.
Yes.
When we have the budget, we have been working with the 2021-2022,
yes,
but now we are working
2022-23.
Yes. Now the Kenya Kwanza government has a clean slate that it will make a budget that is only their own.
Yes.
And there are a number of issues that have come up, and we have seen some of these figures in the supplementary budget. Well, Kenyans are not quite enticed, and especially when it comes to the war on graft, and when you talk about things like the tax evasion, this is something that will also come up. We're also talking about the budget making process and the division of revenue. These are some of the things that will still come up. We saw that what happened during the MP's retreat in Mombasa. These are some of the pertinent issues that we're expecting that both houses will be debating.
They demanded money.
They're demanding money, and even the deputy president said, we do not have money. This is what we can give you. If the economy is better, we'll give you this. But after all said and done, this is what we have. Yes.
I think, thank you, Joe. Just a bit about the taxation issue. I feel that tax is a very important tool in development. But it is also practically proven that you don't only need the tax to finance the economy or to grow the economy.
But we cannot tax ourselves to prosperity.
Indeed. But you see, there are various avenues of raising the income of a country. We have countries like Dubai that have had tax havens. As my colleague is saying here, that by just withdrawal or exemption of a particular category of business people or commercial enterprise, you attract investors in hoods. What that means that the problem with Kenya is we are talking about tax exemption with relation to the political class. What if we were to talk about exemption with relation to commercial enterprises and business class, where we are looking at how many investors will this exemption attract? Every investor into the country, in most cases, you translate to more jobs, more infrastructure, at their own expense. You know, having another person pumping money in your economy at their own cost. For instance, I'm sorry, maybe things like expressway, for instance. Someone built a load with his own money. Kenya didn't have to go out there to look for nearly 80 billion to come and do the load. Someone went there, solicited for a loan, and is carrying that burden. But we are using the load. You know, there are things that need to be looked critically and subjectively. You check, you see, are they individually viable to jumpstart our economy? You have countries, if you look at the tax today, is used as a political tool. Okay? Like you have seen in the previous regime, where people are being attacked by KRI because of tax, whereas it could be negotiated. The very people who are supposed to be benefiting from exemption, for instance, how do you close a whole industry, employing 10,000 people, send them home because of tax, and they are in daily business to generate that money? There are some laws that need to be checked. Things to do with tax, things to do with auctioneers, anything that curtails and limits the flow and peaceful flow of an enterprise, a business daily, is something that the government needs to concentrate on. If you look at the issue of countries that don't have and don't need taxes, look at Kenya today. We are in such a position geographically within the East Africa. We have capacity to do business with our neighbors. And that's why you saw the president, immediately after Ruto was sworn in, he dashed to our neighbors to unlock the borders, to make sure that this dollar that we are clamoring for and we want and we don't have, we can do business with Tanzanians without the dollar. And those are nearly 80% with Uganda. Both of us, we trade about 90% on a daily basis without the dollar. You can go to DRC, do business without the dollar. These are currencies that are coming to allow Kenyans to do business without the dollar. That means even without looking at taxes, there are various activities that you can engage in locally. If the presidential advisor today, and I'm not requesting, but if I get a job, I'll take it. Okay. Look at things like industrialization. We have countries around us who do not have the age limit for their cars. Okay? They take 15 years. In our Kenyan system, we have 7 years. That means a Kenyan can have a car for 7 years, use it from Japan for 7 years, use it for a further 7 to 8 years, put it in auction the way it is done in Japan, and sell it to any other East African country. And it will still be better because it is already localized according to our condition in Africa. It is still better than bringing it from Dubai to sell it at 14 years later, or 15, from Dubai to another country. But here means that we can still do business here, making sure that we tap our resources and harness these resources, not necessarily taxing people all the time. Look at how much you are earning today. Then 30% of that money is going away. First of all, you wonder, why were you told in the first place about it? They could just have come, taken it without your knowledge. It's very painful, by the way. Taxing is not easy, but it's very painful.
Yes, and then let us touch on something that really touches on Kenyans, because in as much as we're talking about taxation, there are some of the things that we're hearing that we could actually press Kenyans a little bit harder. Looking at the cost of electricity, there's a public participation that is going to be going around. There's a cost of water coming up. And yesterday, actually it was on Friday, the Court of Appeal in the NSSF case, you do remember the premiums are set to go higher.
Tokens.
And basing on what we are currently having and the state of the economy, these are some of the things that a lot of Kenyans identify with a pinch. What could be the remedy? Because the MPs will be back this coming week, and I'm quite sure these are some of the things that they will be discussing in the National Assembly and the Senate as well.
Yes, I think when you want to reflect on this debate on the rise of or the proposal to increase even the tokens or the taxes we pay when we buy the tokens, you must look at it from an angle of what has become of the dollar, especially in view of the Kenyan shilling. Every day when you wake up, you realize that the dollar, for you to buy the dollar, you will just need more money, more Kenya shillings, so that the dollar becomes more expensive than the Kenya shillings. That in itself translates to the loss of value of the Kenyan shillings. And remember, ultimately, the economy, the world economy, is actually governed by the dollar. That is why when Mheshimiwa speaks, he speaks of, look at the dollar, we don't need to buy things using the dollar, because we recognize that the dollar has been at the center of what dictates the market values. So when there is this rise, I know it's a recognition of the loss of the value in our currency. So what can we do about it? Now, there are proposals of the government to ensure that we become a sustainable society. We recognize, number one, that taxation in itself is not a bad thing. But even the exemption itself is not a bad thing, because tax, and this is just to add on what Mheshimiwa has been saying, that even while we recognize that we should be equal when it comes to the taxation, remember that the principles that the national values and principles of governance recognize that other than equality, equity is in itself a value that needs to be promoted. So that we have people who are called, people who are living with the disability. They are able differently. They do not have the same capacity as you and I. You and I can run our businesses in a normal way, normal fashion. You come out of here, you will do this job, you'll do the other one. But a person living with the disability, whichever it is, that affects his businesses during the day, I mean, to treat him equally like you will be just as unjust as treating the same people differently. So that we want to say that if the person living with a disability is importing a car, if Mheshimiwa is importing a Prado, because these people work with Prados, if Mheshimiwa is importing a Prado, we will expect him to be whipped very seriously in terms of tax, so that he pays tax and duty to the government to help us. But if a person living with a disability has the opportunity of importing a vehicle, yes, we do not expect him to be treated the same way as Mheshimiwa. It should be duty-free. So that in itself should not be a bad thing. So we need to recognize the principles of equality and equity. And again, it is the responsibility of government it is a responsibility of government to educate its people on the importance of paying taxes, on the importance of, of what is happening. Why are we experiencing this? When I buy tokens in my house, I mean, you see, the majority or a huge chunk of the money I am using to buy the tokens, a huge chunk of it is actually going to taxes. So out of 1,000, probably the tokens I'm buying will be tokens of about 400 and something shillings.
True.
The rest of the money is just disappearing somewhere with the taxes and all these things. I think it's a responsibility of government to help us as people to also understand the kind of problem they are facing. Because ultimately, we want the cost of living to come down, surely.
Yes, and because of the interest of time, let us touch on something I also saw on the supplementary budget. National Treasury proposing an increase of about 10 billion shillings for the ASAL regions, and especially in the drought mitigation.
Yes.
Well, we will not talk about this as a national disaster because it was only declared a national emergency. So all the stakeholders have not put all their energies into that. But away from that, we still a substantial amount of money, bearing in mind that we're still experiencing drought in the country, and of course it's disparaging everything that is in the country. Every money that you're looking for, first things first, the cost of food is a little bit on the higher side.
Yes.
Wishma.
It's a good idea, looking at people who are well deserving on something. We may not have resources for everybody. You'll agree with me that just as Garissa is in need of ASAL fund, so is Tharaka Nithi, so is Royo here. Whereas you're talking because of this sun, the maize is drying in the shamba. So you can say that if it's ASAL funds, it's just because they are more deserving, not because they're the only one. And at the end of the day, but we need to get out of those kinds of emergency addresses. We need to analyze as a country which areas, which opportunities are available in a place better suited. There is no need for me taking a grade cow to Garissa and try to do farming of the cattle there, and channel the resources to do zero grazing and all this milk production in such a place. Kenya now should start analyzing what are we best at in which place. It's called an absolute advantage. Where is the absolute advantage vis-a-vis the comparative advantage of our economic activities? There are so many things we are doing that are not compatible with first the climate. The climate has changed and the weather has moved on. It is only us who has remained where we were. If the rain used to rain in April, we are still there as farmers, waiting for it to come in April. Is the government's work to start now thinking about irrigation? Egypt here, that donates food to us, does not wait for the rain. They have put measures enough for producing food through irrigation, and they use our water. The water that is drowning people in Budalangi is being waited for by fellows in Egypt to grow maize and give it to us as relief. If you look at East Africa today, as you're talking, and I've toured the East African, both Tanzania and Uganda, you can see clearly. If you look from the satellite, you realize that Kenya literally is not just a semi-arid, is an arid region. Only about 25% of the country is arable, good for farming. Look at Tanzania. 95% of the country. Uganda is nearly 100%. Their climate and weather is good for farming. There's something that we need to do right when it comes to farm and food security. Things are not right. And no, we need to know that the climate has changed, things has changed. What can we do best at? Today, the farmers in Tanzania and Uganda are literally farming for us. We cannot survive without them.
They're actually importing some bags of maize.
Even fertilizer the other day, you saw the CS was in Tanzania to secure these things. What are we not doing right? If they farm, can we agree? Kenya by design, if you look at the colonial setup, the way Kenya was designed vis-a-vis the East African neighbors, Kenya was the hub for industrialization. They were using East African countries for raw material. So it means that without looking or smearing at anyone, you can realize that at the end of the day, we can work on a relationship of supporting what they are doing to produce food. At the end of the day, can we empower and equip our industries? Can we look at our source of power to empower production? Can we look at our taxation to support production? Can we look at, because if we keep on farming, like now, you can hear like Nairobi County, for instance, out of the counties in devolution, talking of agriculture. Well, it's not bad to talk about agriculture in Nairobi County. You know very well it's not a major economic activity. So why waste money taking it in the wrong place it cannot give us back? We have the principle that talks of you put in 20 to get a result of 80%. This is not what we are doing in leadership. We are supposed to put in 20% to get back 80. Not putting 80% to get only a pantry 20%. We need to review the way we are doing things, even in government, and trying to see, is this the way things are? People being honest with themselves. Be honest with what you are doing. If our talk today can touch someone out of the whole talk of 2 hours, can change the mindset of someone, can change someone who is listening, and get a point or two to grab and take home and implement and execute someone in authority, then we'll have won in this program.
All right, and I'm quite sure we have touched someone, and I would like also to touch on matter of security, because this is something that has been a thorn, and especially in the Rift. And the government talked about, I remember the CS, Kithure Kindiki, talked about the government is going to be putting in some more funds, and especially on surveillance and intelligence and equipment as we wrap it up.
Well, I think everything will stop and probably even continue from a point of security, because even if some of these investors that we are trying to encourage to come to the country to help us to revive ourselves economically, they will depend largely on the security of the country. I know too well we've been having a problem with security. In any event, I have been in Naivasha District Hospital for the past one week, since last week on Wednesday, because I had my cousin who is living in Mahiu, who was stabbed 5 times. But we thank God he's out of danger. He is now recuperating quite well. And this is because of the challenges of insecurity. And this is not even the first instance you are hearing from places like Mahiu. And this is an area, like probably Mahiu is an area where, I mean, there are a lot of economic activities happening.
Yeah, and agriculture.
Yes, and agriculture that is happening. So when you hear some of these insecurities, because this is someone who has been on the loose, stabbing almost everybody. On Saturday, there was someone who was stabbed and died. On Wednesday, there was someone who was stabbed and died. I mean, before we even start focusing on these big issues, we need to localize security. I like what was happening with Nyumba Kumi, the Nyumba Kumi initiative. If the same thing is to apply across board, it goes over and above, then we'll not even be having problems with the bandits. Because these bandits, who have been a source of insecurity in the northern part of this country and even some parts of the Rift Valley, are doing what they are doing largely because of the harsh economic times and because of a society that has also lost hope with themselves. We no longer care about what is happening with your neighbor's son because of the problem that you are enduring in your own house. So if we localize security, then we will be giving a lot of impetus and encouragement to the current CS. I know he's been speaking tough. The CS has been speaking tough. What I hope, against hope, is that he will follow his tough talk with some action. He will, you know, there has been a problem with the confidence levels of the police officers because of the intimidation sometimes they receive from the IPOA and some of the actions that have been taken by the IPOA. So it is important that moving forward, that he encourages the people he commands to also have some confidence in him. If they have confidence in him, if they know too well that they will be having some shoulder to lean on when the push comes to shove, I mean, the security personnel will also swing into action. Let them be promised better packs. Let them be given the confidence, and then they will execute on their roles.
Well said, gentlemen. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. I have been hosting Wamboi Shadrack, who is an advocate of the High Court and also a governance expert. And also we had Jesse Wanyeki, who is a public administration and also a public law expert on this state of the nation and the state of the current affairs in the country. Thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, that's all the time we had. My name is Ben Troy, and I see Byron Abuli has been our sign language interpreter. I'm now giving the baton to the Swahili desk with Kurunzi Mashinani and Tamrini. Thank you so much for watching. Let's continue this conversation on social media.
Mom, it's so sour.
It's sour?